No one noticed her at first, or maybe they did and simply chose not to. The restaurant was full, warm lights glowing softly over polished wooden tables, the quiet clinking of cutlery blending with low conversations and occasional laughter. She stood near the entrance, clutching the strap of her worn bag, her eyes scanning the room with a mixture of hope and hesitation. Her clothes were clean but plainly old, slightly faded, and that alone seemed enough for the hostess to give her a tight, dismissive smile before saying, "We're full." It wasn't. True, there were empty chairs scattered around, but no one offered her a place. A couple at the nearest table glanced at her, then quickly looked away. A group of friends fell silent for a second, their expressions shifting into something unreadable before they resumed talking as if she didn't exist. She took a small step forward anyway, as if trying to gather courage from somewhere deep inside. But the weight of silent rejection pressed heavily on her shoulders. Just as she turned to leave, a chair scraped loudly against the floor, cutting through the hum of the room. Heads turned. A man sitting alone at a corner table stood up calmly. He wasn't dressed extravagantly, just a simple shirt and jacket, but there was something steady and unbothered about him. Without asking for permission or seeking approval, he reached for the empty chair across from him and pulled it out. The gesture was simple, yet it carried quiet defiance. "You can sit here," he said, his voice clear but gentle. The room seemed to pause, the earlier indifference replaced with curiosity. She hesitated, unsure if this was real or some kind of mistake. But his expression held no judgment, only sincerity. Slowly, she walked toward him, each step feeling heavier under the gaze of strangers. When she reached the table, she stopped for a brief moment, as if expecting someone to object, to tell her she didn't belong. But no one spoke. The man simply waited, his hand still resting on the back of the chair he had pulled out for her. And in that quiet, unexpected moment, surrounded by people who had chosen not to see her, one person finally did.
The tea arrived quietly, placed on the table with a softness that contrasted sharply with the earlier indifference. Alongside it came a small plate of simple food, warm and inviting. She stared at it for a moment, almost as if unsure whether she was truly allowed to touch it. The man gave a small nod, a silent reassurance, and she finally reached out, her movements careful, respectful. "Thank you," she said again, this time a little more firmly. They sat in a calm silence for a few moments, the kind that didn't feel uncomfortable. Around them, the restaurant continued its rhythm, laughter, conversations, the occasional glance in their direction, but it no longer carried the same weight for her. After a while, he asked gently, "Do you come here often?" She gave a small, almost shy smile. "No, this is my first time." She paused, then added, "I just wanted to see what it feels like, to sit somewhere like this, even if just once." There was no bitterness in her voice, only honesty. He nodded, understanding more than she had said aloud. "And how does it feel now?" She looked around the room again, but this time her gaze was different. "It feels less scary," she admitted. "Not because of the place, but because of you." The words seemed to catch him slightly off guard, but he didn't brush them off. Instead, he gave a faint smile. "Sometimes all a place needs is one kind moment to change how it feels." At a nearby table, the woman who had earlier blocked the empty chair glanced over again. This time, her expression wasn't dismissive. It was uncertain, almost reflective. Others who had noticed the scene earlier now seemed quieter, their earlier judgments softened by what they were witnessing. When they finished, the man reached for the bill before she could react. She noticed, her brows furrowing slightly. "I'll repay you someday," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. He shook his head lightly. "You don't have to repay me." She met his eyes, steady now. "I do, maybe not with money, but somehow." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Then pass it on. When you see someone else standing alone, do the same." She smiled, a real one this time, warm and unguarded. As she stood to leave, the same door that had once felt heavy now seemed lighter. She stepped out not as someone who didn't belong, but as someone who had been seen. And inside, at that small table, the echo of a simple gesture lingered, quietly, reminding everyone who had witnessed it that kindness, even in its smallest form, can change the entire room. She sat down slowly, almost cautiously, as if the chair might be taken away at any moment. The man gently pushed it in, then returned to his seat across from her. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The noise of the restaurant gradually returned, but it felt distant now, like it belonged to another world, one she had been standing outside of just moments ago. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely rising above the sound of clinking glasses. "You're welcome," he replied simply, picking up the menu and sliding it toward her. "You should order something." Her fingers hovered over the menu but didn't open it. She looked down, then shook her head slightly. I can't really afford much here," she admitted, her honesty unfiltered but tinged with embarrassment. The man didn't react with surprise or pity. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his tone calm. "Then order what you're comfortable with. Or just sit. You don't have to prove anything to anyone here." His words caught her off guard. She had expected questions, maybe judgment, but not this quiet understanding. Slowly, she opened the menu, her eyes scanning the prices, her grip tightening just a little. Before she could say anything else, a waiter approached their table, the same one who had dismissed her earlier. This time, his posture was different. "What would you like to order, sir?" he asked, his attention clearly directed toward the man, though his eyes briefly flickered toward her. The man glanced at her first. "What would you like?" She hesitated, then softly said, "Just some tea." "That's enough." The man nodded, then added, "2 teas. And bring something light to eat as well." She looked up quickly. "No, really, that's not necessary." "It's fine," he interrupted gently, not forcefully, but with a quiet certainty that made arguing feel unnecessary. The waiter scribbled down the order and left, though his expression carried a hint of discomfort now, as if he had misjudged something earlier. For a moment, she stared at the table, her hands folded together. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked, her voice sincere, not suspicious, just genuinely curious. The man paused, considering the question. Then he said, "Because no one else did." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to understand something deeper behind those simple words.